There's a stretch of highway in the dead of winter, when the snow comes down so thick you can't see the road, when the radio dissolves into static, and when the only thing between you and the frozen dark is a thin pane of glass. That's when the road trip becomes a trap. Tonight, we're driving straight into 5 true winter road trip horror stories from across North America. These aren't campfire tales. They're real accounts of people who lost their way on icy roads and found something waiting in the snow that no tow truck could pull them free of. Before we hit the gas, hit that like button and subscribe, because once we're out there, you'll want to know you're not alone in the dark. Darlene Voss, a 42-year-old high school counselor from Fort Collins, Colorado, had driven the I-25 corridor more times than she could count. But the February trip to her sister's cabin in the San Juan Mountains was different, because the forecast had called 4 light flurries, and instead, the sky turned into a solid wall of white about 20 miles east of Wolf Creek Pass. The snow dumping so fast and so heavy that her windshield wipers couldn't keep up, and the road vanished under a thickening blanket of fresh powder. And she was alone in her old Subaru, her phone dead from the cold and the radio spitting only a robotic NOA warning to seek shelter immediately. So she did the only thing she could. She pulled off at a scenic overlook she remembered from summer trips and turned off the engine. Figuring she'd wait out the storm with the emergency blanket she kept in the trunk, but the snow piled higher and higher, and the windows went opaque, and she was in a cocoon of absolute silence until she heard the voice. A small, pitiful voice coming from somewhere outside, calling, "Mom, Mom, are you in there? I'm so cold, I can't feel my feet." And the voice was exactly like her daughter Emma's. The same pitch, the same little lisp on the S. And Darlene's heart lurched, because Emma was supposed to be safe at home with her father 300 miles away. But the voice was so real, so desperately real, and she fumbled for the door handle, but some primal instinct. Some teachers' intuition, honed by years of dealing with students who played tricks, made her pause and think. Emma never called her mom, she called her mama, and the voice outside had said Mom. And that one tiny detail was a pebble in the gears of her terror. And she pulled her hand back and instead pressed her face to the cold window, and through a small gap in the frost she saw a shape. A figure standing in the swirling snow about 10 feet from the car. A figure that was the height of a child, but whose limbs were too long, whose head was too narrow, and whose mouth was open and moving in a way that didn't match the words she could still hear. "Please, Mom, please open the door. I'm so cold. I just want to come inside." And now she noticed that the figure had no footprints behind it in the snow. The surface was perfectly smooth all around it, and the voice began to shift, sliding from Emma's voice into a deeper, raspier tone that said, "You're smarter than the last one, Darlene. The last one opened the door right away and we had a nice long talk, but you're going to wait. And that's okay. I can wait too. I've waited in this pass for 100 years. I've been the voice of every lost child since the stagecoaches got buried, and I'll be here when you run out of air. When the cold gets too heavy, when you finally decide you'd rather die with company than alone." And the figure stepped closer, and now she could see its face through the glass. A face that was not a face, but a smooth, pale surface, like packed snow molded into the approximate shape of a child's head, with 2 dark hollows where eyes should be, and it pressed its face against the window, and the glass frosted over instantly, and the voice became a low hum that vibrated through the car's frame. And Darlene curled up under the emergency blankets and put her hands over her ears and hummed church hymns to herself. anything to drown out the sound, and the storm raged for 2 more days. And when a snowplow finally found her car, the driver said there were no footprints at all, no sign of anyone. But the driver also said that on the passenger side window, on the outside, there was a handprint, a small handprint that was melted into the glass like acid, and Darlene still has that car. She never fixed the window, because she knows if she replaces the glass, the handprint will just appear somewhere else, maybe on her bedroom window, maybe on her daughter's mirror, and she's learned the lesson of Wolf Creek Pass in the high country blizzards. The snow doesn't just fall, it listens, and it remembers, and it always calls out in the voice of the person you love most, hoping you'll be too grief-stricken or too scared to notice the one word that's wrong. Travis Merrick, a 35-year-old long-haul trucker out of Fairbanks, Alaska, had been running the Klondike Highway for 8 years, hauling everything from fuel to groceries up to the remote mining towns of the Yukon. And he'd seen his share of strange things on the ice roads. The northern lights reflecting off the snow in colors that shouldn't exist, and once a herd of caribou that stood motionless on the tundra, perfectly arranged in a spiral. But nothing prepared him for the hitchhiker he picked up on a moonless January night about 100 miles north of Whitehorse. A figure in a heavy parka standing by the side of the road with one thumb out and no gear, no backpack, no sign of a vehicle. And in the 60 below wind chill, that was a death sentence. So Travis pulled over and opened the passenger door, and the figure climbed in without a word. A young man, maybe 20, with a pale, thin face and dark hair that was frozen in clumps and eyes that were so light a blue they looked almost white. And the young man said, "Thank you. I've been walking for a very long time. I'm trying to get to a place called Destiny Creek." And Travis had never heard of Destiny Creek, but he figured it was one of those old abandoned mining camps. So he nodded and pulled back onto the highway. And for the first few miles, he tried to make conversation, but the hitchhiker just stared straight ahead, not blinking, not even once. And the cab of the truck, which should have been warm, was getting colder. The windshield icing over from the inside, and Travis looked at the temperature gauge, and it read -40 outside, but the inside was dropping fast. And he glanced at the hitchhiker and noticed that the young man's parka was old, the fabric stiff and brittle, and there was a patch on the sleeve that read Yukon Consolidated Gold, 1942, and Travis felt a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. Because he knew that mine had closed before the war, and the hitchhiker turned to him and smiled, and his teeth were coated in frost, and he said, "I died on this road in January of '43. The truck I was riding in went through the ice on the river. And I've been trying to get to Destiny Creek ever since, but I can never find it, because the map I had was burned, and I need someone to show me the way. You look like you know these roads, Travis. You look like you've been driving them for years. Maybe you can take me home." And Travis's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck speeding up to 70 on the icy road, and the hitchhiker's smile widened, and the cold deepened. And Travis felt his hands going numb on the wheel, and the hitchhiker said, "You can't outrun me. I'm already in the cab. I'm already in your lungs. I'm the cold that seeps through the door seals and the floor mats. I'm every winter that has ever killed a man on this highway. And I've been so lonely, Travis. So lonely. The ice preserves me, but it doesn't keep me warm. And I just want a friend to drive with me forever, to keep me company on the long straight stretches where the snow never stops." And Travis, his mind screaming, reached for the thermos of coffee in the cup holder and threw the hot liquid at the hitchhiker. And the moment the coffee hit the parka, the figure convulsed, the frost spreading, the smile twisting into a silent scream. And the hitchhiker dissolved, not into a ghost, but into a pile of wet, slushy ice that filled the passenger seat, and the temperature in the cab shot back up. And Travis pulled over and scooped the ice out of the truck with his bare hands. And he drove on to the next town and never told anyone but the next winter. Driving the same stretch of highway at 2 a.m., he saw a figure in a parka on the side of the road, thumb out, head tilted, and he sped past and didn't look back. And he knows the hitchhiker is still out there, still walking, still asking for Destiny Creek. And if you ever drive the Klondike Highway in the dead of winter and your cab suddenly gets cold, don't pick up anyone. If you already did, don't ask them their name, because once you know the name, they know yours. And they'll never stop trying to climb back into your passenger seat. Kiana Running Wolf, a 26-year-old photographer from Seattle, had dreamed of capturing the northern lights ever since she was a little girl, flipping through National Geographic. And in late November, she finally saved enough for a solo trip up to the Brooks Range in northern Alaska. Renting a sturdy Jeep and driving the Dalton Highway alone, under skies that stretched forever. And on the third night, she spotted a faint green glow on the horizon and followed a narrow, unmarked road that branched off the highway and wound through a valley of black spruce, the snow crunching under her tires. And the road led her not to an open viewing spot, but to the remains of an old mining town. A dozen or so wooden buildings half buried in drifts, their windows dark and their roofs sagging, and the Aurora was swirling directly overhead in sheets of green and purple. So she parked in the middle of what had once been the main street and set up her tripod. And she was snapping long exposures when she noticed that one of the buildings, a 2-story structure with a faded sign that read Last Chance Hotel, had a light in one of its upstairs windows. A faint, flickering yellow glow like a candle, and she told herself it was a reflection, maybe a trick of the Aurora. But the light was steady and warm, and it didn't change when the sky shifted. And then she heard music, a piano, playing a slow, sad waltz. The sound was coming from the hotel, and her curiosity was a sharp hook in her chest, pulling her toward the door, and she left her camera running and walked up the creaking steps and pushed open the door. And inside the hotel was not abandoned. It was alive, the lobby lit by oil lamps, fire crackling in a stone hearth, and a dozen people in old-fashioned clothing were sitting in armchairs and standing by the bar. And they all turned to look at her as she entered, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, and an old woman with a lace collar smiled and said, "Welcome, traveler. We've been expecting you. The Aurora always brings us visitors, though most don't stay. Please, sit by the fire, warm yourself. The night is long and cold, and Kiana's instincts were screaming at her to run. But the warmth was so inviting after the bitter cold, and she stepped inside, and the door closed behind her on its own. And the piano music swelled, and the woman said, "We are the town that froze in 1911. The blizzard came so fast we didn't have time to escape. We've been here ever since, kept alive by the Aurora, but we need new blood to keep the memory fresh, new faces to remember us. And you're so young and so full of life, Kiana. Your name is already carved in the guest register. Look," and she pointed to an old leather-bound book on the desk, and Kiana saw her own name written in elegant script. And the date next to it was that very night, and the old woman said, "You can stay as our guest forever, or you can try to leave, but the Aurora won't let you go. It has already tasted your light, and it wants more, and Kiana grabbed the door handle. And it was hot to the touch, and the aurora outside flared to an impossible brightness. A green so intense it was almost white, and she felt her body dissolving, her edges blurring, and she focused on her heartbeat, on the sound of her own blood. And she wrenched the door open and fell out into the snow, the cold slamming into her like a wall, and the hotel behind her was dark and silent. No lights, no music, just the empty shell of a dead building, and she crawled to her Jeep and drove, not stopping until she hit Fairbanks and when she developed her photos. The long exposures of the aurora showed the hotel with every window lit and shapes standing on the porch, waving, and the last image on the card, taken while she was inside, showed herself sitting by the fire, smiling, wearing a dress from 1911. She knows that part of her is still in that hotel, still sitting by the fire, still listening to the waltz. When one day the aurora will call her back, and she will answer, because a name in the guest register is a promise, and the town always collects. Bradley Heffernan, a 39-year-old real estate agent from Burlington, Vermont, was driving with his wife Claire and their 2 young daughters to his parents' house in New Hampshire on Christmas Eve. The car packed with gifts and the kids singing carols in the back, when a snow squall closed the interstate and forced them onto a series of back roads that Bradley's GPS insisted would shave an hour off the trip. But the roads got narrower, and the snow got deeper, and the GPS signal flickered out, and they found themselves on a single-lane track through a dense forest of bare oaks and towering pines. The car's headlights barely cutting through the falling snow, and then they came to a town, a place called Dunmore Hollow, according to a hand-painted sign that was nailed to a tree. And the town was postcard pretty, a main street of colonial houses with candles in every window and wreaths on every door. And the kids exclaimed in delight at the Christmas decorations, and Claire said they should stop and ask for directions, but Bradley felt a deep, instinctive wrongness about the place because the candles weren't electric, they were real flames. And the wreaths weren't made of evergreen, but of twisted, dark vines, and there were no power lines, no cars, no footprints in the snow. And yet the town was clearly inhabited, because a figure stepped out of the nearest house. A tall man in a black overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat, his face shadowed, and he waved at them with a long, pale hand and called out, "Travelers, come in. We have hot cider and a place by the fire. It's Christmas Eve, and no one should be on the road tonight." And Claire was already unbuckling her seatbelt, but Bradley locked the doors and said, "We're not stopping," and he pressed the accelerator. But the car barely moved, the tires spinning on an invisible patch of ice. The man in the overcoat walked closer, and now Bradley could see his face, and it was wrong, the skin too smooth, the eyes too far apart, the mouth a thin, straight line, and the man said, "The road through Dunmore Hollow only opens for those who accept our hospitality. You've driven into the hollow on the one night of the year when the veil is thin and the town needs guests for the feast. We only ask one family a year, and you've been chosen. Come and eat with us, and we'll let you go at dawn." And the doors of the other houses opened, and more figures stepped out, all in dark clothing, all with those same smooth, wrong faces, and they began to walk toward the car, and the children were crying. Claire was screaming, and Bradley threw the car into reverse and stomped on the gas, and the car lurched backward, the ice cracking, and the figures began to run, not with a human gait, but a gliding, effortless motion, their feet not touching the ground. And the man in the overcoat opened his mouth, and the mouth kept opening, wider and wider, and a sound came out that was not a voice, but a chorus of bells tolling backward. And Bradley swung the car around and sped back the way they came, the figures pursuing them until the edge of town, where they stopped as if hitting an invisible wall, and the man in the overcoat raised a hand in a slow wave, and his voice echoed in the car even with the windows up. Next Christmas Eve, the hollow will be waiting, and the road will find you again. Wherever you are, because you've seen us now, and the invitation is permanent. And Bradley drove until they hit a real town, a gas station where the attendant told them that Dunmore Hollow had been abandoned since the 1800s. A whole town that disappeared one Christmas Eve and every year since. A family traveling through the area on Christmas Eve has gone missing, and Bradley and his family made it home safe, but every Christmas Eve since, no matter where they are, a hand-painted sign appears outside their house, reading Dunmore Hollow welcomes you, and the candle in their front window goes out at exactly midnight, and they hear the tolling of bells from deep in the woods. Bradley knows the hollow hasn't forgotten. One year the road will find them again, and this time they won't be able to reverse. Amelia Kowalski, a 31-year-old FedEx delivery driver out of Fargo, North Dakota, knew the rural routes like the back of her hand. And on a frigid January afternoon, she was finishing her rounds when a blizzard warning upgraded to an emergency. The radio crackling with orders to return to the depot. But she had one last package in the back of her truck. A small, heavy box addressed to a name she didn't recognize, at an address on a county road she'd never seen before. And the GPS showed it was only 3 miles away, so she decided to make the delivery and then head in. And she turned down a long, unplowed lane that ended at a farmhouse. A 2-story white clapboard structure with a sagging porch and a single light burning in the kitchen window. And she told herself that someone must live there even though the place looked abandoned. And she grabbed the package and trudged through the knee-deep snow, the wind howling so loud she couldn't hear her own footsteps. She knocked on the front door, and it swung open on its own, revealing a dark hallway that smelled of dust and something sweet, like rotting jam. And she called out, "FedEx, I have a delivery for a Mr. Sorensen." And a voice from the back of the house said, "Bring it in, please. I'm in the kitchen. I can't come to the door." And the voice was thin and reedy, like an old man's. And Amelia stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind her. And the hallway stretched ahead into darkness, and the voice said, "This way, this way. Follow the light. The package is for me. I've been waiting for it a very long time." And she walked toward the kitchen light, the floorboards creaking, the walls lined with old photographs that watched her pass. And when she entered the kitchen, she saw a man sitting at a wooden table, an old man in a flannel shirt and overalls, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken, and he was holding a knife, a long curved blade that glinted in the light. And on the table in front of him was a wooden box, open, and inside the box was a collection of small, white bones, and the old man smiled and said, "Ah, the delivery. I was worried it wouldn't arrive before the storm. See, I've been collecting pieces for years, and this package contains the final piece, the heart. And once I have the heart, I can complete the ritual, and the farm will wake up, and the fields will grow again. But they need to be fed, and you, my dear, are the first meal of the new season." And Amelia dropped the package and turned to run, but the kitchen door was gone. The wall smooth and blank, and the old man rose from the table, and his body unfolded, stretching taller and taller, his limbs elongating, his mouth splitting into a too-wide grin, and he said, "The snow will bury your truck by morning, and no one will find you until spring, and by then the farm will have taken what it needs. Your bones will join the collection, and your heart will go into the box. And someone else will deliver the next piece next winter. It's a cycle, you see. I've been the caretaker since 1888, and I've never missed a delivery. And Amelia looked around the kitchen and saw, through a doorway into the pantry, shelves stacked with jars, and in the jars were not preserves but small, preserved organs floating in yellowish fluid. And she knew she was in the house of a monster, and she did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed the box of bones from the floor and threw it at the old man. And the bones scattered, and the man shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the house, and the kitchen door reappeared. And she ran down the hallway. The photographs on the walls now showing her own face, screaming, and she burst out of the front door into the blizzard. And the truck was still there, and she drove away, plowing through drifts, and she made it back to the depot. But when she looked in the back of the truck, the package was still there. The box addressed to Mr. Sorensen, and she tried to throw it away, but every morning it appeared on her doorstep, and the return address was her own name, and the contents rattle when she shakes it. And she knows the farmhouse is still out there. The old man is still waiting, and one day she'll have to deliver the heart, whether she wants to or not, because the route is already programmed into her GPS, and the blizzard always finds a way to bring her back to that long unplowed lane. The road in winter is a thin thread stretched between civilization and the frozen unknown, and these 5 travelers nearly fell off the edge. Whether it was a phantom child in a Colorado blizzard, a hitchhiker made of ice on the Klondike Highway, or a Vermont town that only exists on Christmas Eve, each of them discovered that the cold isn't always the deadliest thing on the road. If you're planning a winter trip, carry an emergency kit. Check your route, and if you see a sign for a town that doesn't appear on the map, keep driving. I want to hear from you, Hav. You ever experienced something unexplainable on a winter road trip? Drop your story in the comments, because every shared experience adds another mile to our collective survival guide. And if these stories gave you a chill deeper than the snow, hit that like button and subscribe with all notifications on. We're a small channel built on real terror and the bravery of people like you who share their darkest moments. Drive safe, keep a blanket in the trunk, and never, ever pick up a hitchhiker who doesn't blink.